And what's the biggest stadium that you guys have played at? I don't know if you
We
remember.
yeah, we did. We did. There was a festival called Edge Fest, which was kind of like a precursor to Lollapalooza.
Okay.
Um, that was about 30,000, I think.
Whoa, that's a lot of people. Our guest today is Tim White. Tim is best known for his role as the bassist for the iconic Canadian rock band, the Headstones. Having performed well over 1,000 live shows and having achieved several gold and platinum album certifications, they have carved their place in rock and roll history. Today, Tim works as a voice director and composer in Toronto and has directed studio sessions with celebrity talent such as Kaylee Cuoco, Daryl Sittler, and Lisa Edelstein. He has composed original music for advertising, documentaries, and TV series, including the award-winning Netflix series Blown Away. Tim is also a professional voice actor. He has extensive experience in voicing advertising campaigns for A-list clients, which include Bell, Expedia, Kraft, General Motors, and Tim Hortons. In this podcast, we dive deep into his rock and roll past, his experiences in advertising and composing, music's cultural influence on society, and the Headstones' legacy. Tim is funny, fiercely intelligent, and incredibly kind. We thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and hope you do as well. Now, without further ado, here's Tim White.
So yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, I know you have a lot of facets, a lot of things you're into, a lot of things you've done. Uh, Please tell people who you are and everything
Okay.
about you.
All right. My name is Tim White. I am the voice director at Circumflex Toronto. I'm also the bass player in a Canadian rock band known as the Headstones. And what else? Amazing podcast guest, especially especially for these two guys. I'm the most amazing for these two guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you on.
Hey, no, thanks for inviting me. This is cool. This is great.
But yeah, so let's start off. I know you have a very incredible family history and family background. From your father Bill, who was the first Black Canadian to run for federal office in Canada, to your aunt Portia White, who was a renowned opera singer and has been declared a person of national historic significance by the government of Canada, which is, I would say, pretty significant.
Yeah.
How did your family background influence your life and kind of decisions, specifically, of course, to music, audio, and all that stuff?
Yeah. Well, I grew up obviously, in a musical family, and my father, Bill, taught singing on the weekends. And so I'd wake up like, in the morning on Saturdays to scales being sung, more or less in tune. And then, in his sort of instruction, my parents would also have parties a lot where there was a lot of people would bring instruments and there was a lot of singing and going on. So it was just a completely natural environment for me. And when I said at the age of 14 that I wanted to be a musician, nobody said, over my dead body or anything like that. It was just like, yeah, okay, great, fine, go for it. So it was a really supportive environment. I mean, I don't know if I would have done it the same way if it had been met with any kind of negativity or anything like that. Um, but yeah, it was a completely, totally accepted profession. And also my aunt, Portia White, who you mentioned, um, she was such a trailblazer. I never got to meet her, unfortunately, but I certainly grew up, knowing who she was and listening to her recordings and that kind of thing. And yeah, it just made me feel like, yeah, this is, anybody can do this. Anybody can be a musician. Like if I can, she went through so much to do what she did at such a high level. I didn't have anywhere near the barriers facing me that she did. So it made me feel like I could do it right out of the gate, which which was good confidence to have, I guess.
Just out of curiosity, did your dad teach you kind of the basics of music, or did you go to like a teacher and it was separate from him?
Yeah, no, good question. My dad taught me piano, starting at about age 5 or 6. He started showing me stuff on piano, and then I went to piano lessons for some reason, and I hated it. It was awful. It was like the absolute opposite. He was just teaching me by ear, songs that I knew, and old songs too. Because my dad was quite, like, he was 52 when I was born, so he was quite a bit older than me. And so I learned songs from like the 30s and the 40s. Um, and then I went to piano lessons, and I was learning Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and reading it off of sheet music, and and my piano teacher would correct me on how I was playing it, and so that lasted like 2 weeks, and then I quit. And then my family got together and gave me a bass on my 14th birthday, and then I was lucky enough to have an amazing bass teacher right out of the gate, and that kind of fueled it from then on. But yeah, started it on piano.
So when you were playing piano, in that little period, and by the way, I also took piano lessons when I was young, so I hear your struggle there.
The brotherhood, isn't it?
Yeah. Did you find like so? All right, so your father was teaching you kind of through like to develop that musical ear and stuff, and then like you mentioned the piano lessons. Was there like a gap there between when you got that bass and really started to take that a little bit more seriously and the lessons?
Bass lessons, you mean?
Or piano lessons, sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, the piano lessons stopped like years before that.
Okay.
And then I didn't really, I was just sort of like casually playing piano. I didn't decide I wanted to be a musician until I started playing bass. That was kind of my end point, because then I could relate the instrument I'm playing to the music I'm listening to. And then I was really lucky to get a really good bass teacher like 2 weeks after I got my bass. Like, that helped a lot. I also got into a band. Somehow, like a month later, I got into my first band, which makes no sense at all, but I did. And the guitar player was a few years older, and so he taught me all the songs. Like, he taught me Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, which I didn't hear until years later. And I learned that I've been playing it completely wrong, but I just played what he told me to play. It's just kind of funny how music's one of those things or art, maybe you can just learn wrong and it's fine. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
So what did you wanna, or what did you think when you were younger that you wanted to be, if it wasn't anything music related?
Oh,
if you remember.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Yeah, I just thought it would be an interesting question, because I know for some people it's like, it's like soccer player, astronaut, whatever. It's like musician, but it's like,
yeah,
what is that thought like right before that? It's like, what did you envision? But I feel like for yourself as well, as like, I don't know, because you come from a music background, maybe it always was somewhat music related.
I don't think I ever thought of it. I think I was just the intersection of when I started taking music seriously probably coincided with when you start to have those kind of thoughts of what am I going to be when I grow up. And then once I decided that, I didn't consider anything else.
Which is, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty cool. Like,
I'm just super unimaginative. That's what it is. I just got one idea. Okay, good. I'm good to go.
So when would you say like that moment was for you where, I mean, I know you got signed in the early 90s, but would you say that was the moment where you went, oh, okay, like this is for real now? Or was there something else where you kind of had a, oh shit, I might have made it moment?
The Headstones got signed in 1993, which coincided with our first record being made. And I think, I'd played in bands and I'd played on recordings and stuff before that. But yeah, the record deal legitimized it. Like, I don't think it's the same now, but getting signed really said, okay, good. Now I can say that I'm a musician, like I can walk around and say that I'm a rock star if I want to. Nobody can say I'm not because I've got a record deal. Look, there it is. Um, but it's funny because before that, I mean, I played in all kinds of bands and made records and did shows and toured and all that stuff. But yeah, the label thing made a big difference.
So going back a few years back, so what made you decide rock music? Because again, it's like, your family background's like you have choirs, you have opera. It's like how did you get to rock out of all those out of all of those?
Yeah, it's just proximity. It's like you listen to what your friends are listening to, and none of my friends were listening to like classical or jazz music or anything like that. And it was fine. It was just kind of what I gravitated to. It was just the music that was around. And then, yeah, I mean, I went to school. I went to Berklee College of Music later on, and technically that's a jazz program. And I think I had the idea that I might at some point play upright. Um, but at that school, they very quickly say if you're carrying an electric bass, they're like, oh, he's a rock player. And if you're carrying an upright, like, oh, he's a jazz player. So you're not even really given the choice. Even though I was studying jazz and learning all this super complicated stuff and music theory and everything like that. Even they said I was a rock player, so I was like, I had like no chance at all.
That's funny. How just out of curiosity, like music from my musical perspective, what is school like for you? Like what does a day-to-day, I guess, day look like for you as a musician? And would you say, as somebody, for example, aspiring to be a musician, is school the way to go? Is there pros and cons kind of like in every other profession, or is it like you must go to school because that will give you the base to do everything else? Get it? The base?
Mm.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
That's fun.
I think it depends if you like. I mean, I really liked it. It was a great school. The environment is like, I mean, it's it's a college of music, but it retains, because it's just a bunch of musicians. It kind of feels like high school in a way, just a little older. It's very casual in that way. Um, but I really loved it. Like you're taught by working professionals. Um, your morning would be you go to like music theory class, and then you maybe have a music history class, then you have like ear training, and you have lunch, and you have your private lesson, which is your one-on-one with whatever instrument you're taking, and then you do have to take English. That's the only downside. You have to take an English class. um, but everything else is all music related classes, so it's fun. I was super into it. My teachers were, like I said, they're working professionals. I remember one of my teachers for my theory class, he said, we're not going to have an exam this semester because I have to go to Japan and work with Stevie Wonder. So sorry,
Wow.
guys. Yeah, I know. And that was that was normal. That was really common to hear that kind of thing. And then they would have like really high profile musicians come and give concerts. And it was just a really good environment for me. I gravitated to it anyway.
So
I don't know if
with
it's
the
necessary.
oh, sorry.
I
I
was
was
good.
just gonna
Yeah.
say, with the music school, I know, like, I mean, some people go for and they become like composers, for example.
Yeah.
What would the difference really be there? Because you mentioned that you get taught in your specific instrument, like you have classes in that. So what would that be
Yeah.
like if you're, I don't know, you're
If you're
learning
in
to
the
try and,
composition
yeah.
program, I don't know actually. That's a great question. I mean, I think they're probably studying, film music and film scoring. Maybe they're scoring to, pieces of film or something, or rescoring or that kind of thing. But I didn't hang out with any of the composers, so I have no idea. I just hang out with the musicians.
Do
Yeah,
you have
but I imagine it's similar.
do you have regrets not hanging out with the composers now that now that
I
that is a
really
part of your job?
I really should have. I should have hung out with them way more. I'm sure they were way smarter.
Actually, out of like when it comes to like music school, kind of you said it was similar to high school. So is it also the same idea where it's like you have the jocks, but it's like a specific instrument that you play, or like the cool people, the football people?
I love that idea. No, I just mean that there's more personality types, and people hang out with one another in the same way. And there's like, there's a bit of like a social scene going on as well, inside and outside of school. That's all I meant by that. But then I don't know, maybe it's exactly like university and I just have nothing to compare it to. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't go to school for that long. We ended up
right
dropping out because
you guys are dropouts.
Yeah, we're a couple of degenerates over here. So
yeah, that's right. That's good. That's good. See, and now you have a media empire.
Oh, yeah. Maybe one day. But I was curious to just to go back to the band a little bit. What was it like? Like, what's the process like of getting signed to a record label?
I don't know if it's the same now, but at the time, we were just playing around, and we would do what were called showcases for the label. The label would come out and see us, and there's an A&R guy for every record label whose job it is to go out and sign new acts. And there was this guy named Cam Carpenter who worked at Universal, which was called MCA back then. And he saw us and he liked us, and it was his job to say, these guys are great, you should sign them. I don't know how difficult it was for him to do it, but it seemed like it was pretty easy on our end. It's like, great, okay, good. We're going to do that. Also, at this time, this is like the 90s, just sort of pre-grunge, and there was a bit of a rock and roll kind of renaissance going on as trends come and go, and it was a time of bands like the Tragically Hip becoming really, really successful. And so the thing that happens is, what other Canadian bands are there? And, our singer Hugh is from Kingston, where the Hip are from. So there was a connection there, and I'm sure all that helped,
right.
But essentially it's kind of like signing a contract, a really bad contract in some cases.
Can you
make sure you read everything.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Not really, but I mean, record contracts are sort of known not to be great, and back then they were probably really not great because they're mostly in favor of the record company and very little in favor of the artists. I feel like things have leveled out a little bit now.
Yeah, I think also the democratization of music when it comes to things like Spotify and SoundCloud and Apple Music and all that kind of stuff, probably like you have a way for people to listen to your stuff. Like from anybody in the world can listen to it. Which wasn't the case before.
Exactly. And only really the physical medium existed, plus terrestrial radio, right? So yeah, you kind of needed them because studios were really expensive. Pressing vinyl or CDs was really expensive. Artwork, distribution, promotion, all that stuff. Like you couldn't do it on your own. It cost too much money.
I'd actually be curious. Do you have any input on how maybe like streaming services have changed the music industry?
Aside from the ways that you've mentioned, the biggest change for me is I know about way more bands because of the bands that I listen to. You know what I mean by that? Like you can go into Spotify and you can pick a song, and then maybe that turns into a playlist, and then you discover this other band, and then you start listening to them, and then you find out who produced them, and you get into that producer, and it's really cool because it's endless, right? How far you can go. Whereas when we were signed, you might hear this band on the radio, and then you have to go and buy the record, or maybe you were at a friend's house and they had that record, and then your friend was nice enough to say, oh, if you like this band, you should check out this band or this artist. And then you would borrow the record from them because you probably wouldn't want to take the chance to go and buy it yourself. So you would borrow it, and then you like break it or lose it or scratch it. You stop being friends. And then, then you make up and everything's better, and you buy them the new record by that band. Anyway, I digress.
Well, sounds like that might have happened to you.
Maybe, but
personal experience.
The other thing that's different is that live music was another way to find out about bands. Like routinely I would go and see a band, and then the opener would be awesome, and I'd never heard of them before, and then I would go and check them out. But the big difference is, like you say, yes, the democratization of music. Instead of having these individual channels that you could find new stuff from, everything is available to you all the time.
Do you think that that for people starting out today in the music space, do you feel like that has made it easier or harder to get noticed?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I wonder that all the time. Um, it seems like something like touring would be harder, um, because there's just so much entertainment. You're competing with people's phones. You're competing with Netflix at home. You're competing with all media basically. Um, but at the same time, the barrier to recording is almost zero now. You can record, at home essentially for free. You can make things sound good fairly easily. So yeah, I don't know. I think making music is easier, but maybe getting your music out there might be harder because there's just you're in competition with everything.
Right.
And speaking of going back to live music, what's your favorite live performance by either a band or a musician that you've ever listened to, and why do you think that one catches your eye more than any of the other ones?
I can only pick one.
You can pick three.
Top
Oh,
three.
Top three,
okay.
make it easy.
Okay. Wow. Well, the Headstones last tour was particularly amazing. I'd have to count one of those shows in there. Probably our Toronto show in December. That was a great show, and I'm not being like totally facetious either. Like, we're a very good live band, and it's really exciting to come and watch it. So I put that number one. Um, the bands that stand out are the bands that I didn't expect to be good, or bands that I just went to for the hell of it. There's a great duo from the UK called the Ting Tings that I went to see a few years ago. I think the tickets were like $16 or something. They weren't super well known, but it was an amazing show. Like they killed it. They absolutely killed it. It was fantastic.
I'll have to look it up after the Ting Tings.
What do you think
Ting
makes a
Tings.
good show? Because again, it's like I'm sure you've seen probably many live shows. I mean, you play live shows. You've done
Yeah,
it for years. What do you
yeah.
think makes a good live show from your perspective?
Well, you have to. I mean, the band has to be having fun. The band has to be really, really genuinely enjoying it. Um, uh, they have to. The band has to find some energy and transfer that to and from the crowd, and engage the crowd. Um, Obviously, I think intensity, like to sum it up in a single word. Does that make sense? Like just if you can see somebody like fully involved and fully consumed by what they're doing, I think that's really undeniably attractive and appealing to watch. Whether that could be anybody, that could be in dance, and that could be acting. The people that are really 100% into it, you just have to watch them, and I think that's what makes a good show.
And what was your first live show like? What was that experience coming onto stage, seeing the people, thinking that you could mess up, you could fall, you could slip, something could happen. So, like, because I feel like in a live show, anything can happen. It's like you really don't know.
Yeah,
So what is that
you don't know what's
experience
going
like?
on.
Like walking up to the stage.
Uh, Now it's, well, I mean, pretty quickly you get over your nerves of doing it after you do it a few times. I mean, I do anyway. I mean, I shouldn't say you, because some people suffer from like terrible stage fright. Um, but yeah, I'm only nervous like for like maybe 60 seconds before going on stage, and then once you're on, it's on, and there's nothing you can do about it. You
What
just gotta go for it.
What about the first show that you've ever had?
Oh,
Do
the
you do
very
you have any
first show,
do you have any memories of that?
yeah, that was a high school battle of the bands, and uh, our guitar player wasn't very good, in my opinion, so I played guitar. I wasn't very good either, but I thought I was better than him. Um, we picked our singer because he was the best looking guy in school, and he got on stage and he was just swaying back and forth. He couldn't sing. He just had total stage fright. He's like catatonic. So I tried to make up for it by solos and turning my amp up to 11, and we didn't make the Battle of the Bands. It was really like soul crushing. I was really upset, really angry at the school committee. And I thought, like, I jumped around a lot, like, what's wrong with having a lot of stage presence? We're better than anybody else. And they didn't let us play. And the important lesson I learned from that is I shouldn't play guitar live. I should just stick to bass and do that. And then everything was fine after that.
That's funny. I would be curious too, given that I guess you started touring more seriously in the 90s. I've heard a lot of like kind of crazy stories about the tour life and especially
as a rock star.
Yeah, the kind of the rock and roll lifestyle. I was just curious, like, was it as kind of hedonistic, if you will, as people say?
Well, on the record, I'll tell you that every story you've ever heard about rock and roll life on tour is true.
Wow.
At least potentially true. Not in everybody's case, and not always in our case. But it's just, I say it like this: it's the only job where you show up and, back then anyway, you show up and there's a bunch of booze waiting for you, and there's a bunch of people that want to hang out and party with you, and they want to buy stuff for you and take you places and lead you into new experiences. And then, you wind up doing that, and then you go to the next town and it's exactly the same thing. And so this becomes like a way of life for you, and this just becomes how you operate and how you walk around. So it becomes normal.
Were you ever tired of that lifestyle, or did you always enjoy it?
At the time, it became exhausting after a while. Like, you can only party so much. Like, there is a ceiling on when, but yeah, like towards the end, I think we were all pretty exhausted. I mean, we just, some history, we were together from 1993 to 2002. And then we got back together in 2012. And since we've gotten back together, it's been fantastic because most of us are sober and most of us are, older and wiser, and we know how to operate. And the shows are, I would say, better than ever. But in that first 9 or 10 years, it was, we had a great time. It was awesome. It was a way of life. We weren't really thinking about anything. It was like sort of like just a more or less a constant party. And that'll get to anybody after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's some of the stories like that I've heard are pretty well. Actually, I'm curious because I saw that you were a big David Bowie fan.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Is that still true?
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering, how did you know that?
Oh, I read it in actually,
don't worry about it.
we'll keep our sources to our.
Your friends and family are not safe from us.
Yeah.
I better turn my location services on. All right, sorry. Continue.
No worries. Yeah. So one story that I had heard about David Bowie, that was absolutely shocking to me was that there was a period of time, I believe, when he was. I can't remember where he was living. I think it might have been in Germany, or maybe it was in the UK, where he was living off of cocaine, milk, and green peppers. Have you ever heard anything about this?
This is the first time I've heard about that combination of things. Yeah, that's an interesting choice. That's very specific.
Yeah,
the milk I understand.
Yeah.
Because it would be soothing. Green peppers. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, and it was one of my high school friends was a huge Bowie fan, and he told me about that, and I was always kind of like, that is so bizarre. Like, and well, the thing is too, like, there was a period where he lost a ton of weight, and
yes.
And I'm just wondering, I mean, like that, I mean, if all you're living on is green peppers and cocaine
Yeah,
with some milk.
drugs will do that to you.
Yeah, I was like, that could have been it. But out of curiosity, what about David Bowie really stands out to you in terms of both a performer and just a musician in general?
I always liked Bowie just because, well, two reasons really. He was supernatural in the way that, I mean supernatural, I mean incredibly natural, in that he would go into the studio, he would do 2 or 3 takes of a song. If it wasn't happening, he'd just move on. It's like, it's not happening, let's do it tomorrow or whatever. He didn't really like labor over every little point. It had to have the vibe. If it didn't have the vibe, it was the point. So I learned that. The other thing I liked is how he would create these entire personas, completely fleshed out personalities, and then ditch them after 3 or 4 years and create another one. I was like, wow, it's so brave, like what confidence to think I can make this thing. It's super popular. I'll do a record or two as this person, and then I'm just going to start all over again as something else, instead of just relying on the same old thing. So that taught me to be, not afraid to be different or to try stuff. There's always another move you can make, down the road.
Yeah, totally. Do you have a favorite persona of his?
No, not really.
Oh.
Not really. I don't really think of it that way. It's just like the guy was just really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my friend in high school, his favorite was Ziggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of people's, and I think it's probably his most popular with everybody. But I didn't view it that way. I just sort of saw it as, songs and eras and, stuff. I don't really have a favorite. It's just an impressive artist.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you find whenever you listen to something, especially something popular, is it something now, because you're in the music scene, that like you can tell that a song is going to go viral, or you tell that it's going to be a big favorite with a lot of people, or is that something that you can never really tell?
I can't tell that. I don't have that. I don't have that ability. I've been wrong about so many things both ways, thinking that something was going to be super popular and it's not, and the vice versa, saying, wow, that's terrible, and then it's a massive hit. Yeah, no, I can't tell. I couldn't tell you. I can tell you that something that sounds unique has a better chance of being a huge hit than something that you feel like you've heard before.
Which is actually pretty interesting as well, because aren't like most popular songs, at least nowadays, like specifically guitar-wise, are mostly played on 4 or 5 chords?
Yeah. So I mean, everything is like simple is better. Simple's good. But you never know really what's going to kind of take hold in people's consciousness, like what's going to strike a chord.
Out of all the, I mean, there's been a lot of different eras, I guess, of I guess you could call it pop music, but I just find like the predominant genre, I guess, in popular culture. When you were younger, obviously, or at least what my dad tells me, I mean, rock was it was it, like that was the genre, and then now we've gotten to this place where I feel like it's like, I don't even know, like techie pop kind of.
There's
yeah,
so many.
Yeah, like, yeah. I guess it's yeah. Do you have like when you look at music and everything that's been popular and has been popular in the past, do you kind of see a pattern of like reason why music gets popular, and then like what might be popular as time goes on?
That's a good question. I have to think about that. Yeah, that's a pretty big question to answer. Because really, hip hop is the dominant form of music now. Probably hip hop and country, I would say. And there's no real reason for that. Like hip hop was hip hop was sort of like, you know, the punk rock of the 80s and early 90s, and then it became mainstream. But country music has been around forever. So, you know, why is that happening? I don't know. I have no idea. What I do know now is that because you don't necessarily need radio play to get your music out there, that you can create fans of music. You can create fans of all kinds of styles of music. There's a really awesome website that you should check out called Every Noise at Once. And it's a site that details every genre and every subgenre of music.
Wow.
You know, yeah. Like if you want to listen to like, you know, Romanian deep trance, or you want to listen to, you know, Scottish post-punk shoegazing, it's in there. Like seriously, it's amazing. And then you click on the title or the subgenre, and it takes you to a Spotify playlist, or it takes you to an example of that, and then that'll take you to a Spotify playlist if you want to listen to more.
What's the weirdest things you've heard on there? Because like I know some genres are like it's like just a sound, or just like there's so many odd things I find. Is there something that you've come across that you're like, this is extremely odd but interesting?
No, although I think ASMR as a concept is pretty strange and interesting. How popular it is that people want to listen to like super intimate sounds of anything, like of any kind of activity. I think that's really, it says a lot about how we like how powerful sound is to our ears, that we want to just listen to that.
That's very, very true.
Yeah, I feel like there's something about just the human experience that makes you want to be. I mean, I feel like everybody on some level craves some sort of intimacy, right? So like, whether that's visual or auditory, I could totally see how, or like maybe that would be the reason why that ASMR is kind of taken hold that way.
Yeah, it's yeah, you definitely don't feel alone maybe when you listen to it, and maybe that's the appeal. I haven't read up on it enough to know.
Yeah.
But that's one of the sort of phenomena that's come out in the last little while.
Because like one of the other things with ASMR as well is that it's not only people talking, it's also like, you know, a very close up of somebody opening a can, or like just random things. It doesn't actually have to be talking, which is just fascinating as well. That it's like people will watch the things you do every day and then get millions of views listening to it. It's like, how does anybody explain that? It's like I really wonder like who started that. It's like, was there a person in like the 1800s doing some ASMR videos, and it slowly kind of went up from there?
But in the 1800s, you would have had to go to their place and just like listen, like put your ear right next to what they were doing, and people
Beethoven ASMR. Well, you know what's kind of funny about Beethoven? Just that example. I mean, there's always these. Like, I mean, you always see, like, the depictions of him, and he's got, like, because since he went deaf, he's got that, I don't know, it looks like a horn or something that he used to listen. And
oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm picturing now for Beethoven ASMR, is you just get one of those, and you're just going to, I'm curious, for yourself, I mean, you mentioned earlier, so you guys split as a band in 2002. What made you guys come to that decision, and what was it like for you in the aftermath of that?
And also before you touch on that, just for the viewers, can you talk a bit more about the success of your band and kind of everything that you guys accomplished before that happened?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're arguably more successful now than we were then, but maybe it's like apples and oranges. You can't really compare them. But we did have we had several gold records and a platinum record We did a lot of touring, played a lot of shows all over North America and South America. Went to England a couple of times. Um, our singer Hugh Dillon went on to have a very successful acting career, which started in the mid '90s while we were a band. And we made some good records. We had a lot of top 10 charting singles. Like we were successful by any measure of music success at that point. Um, and in spite of that, after a certain amount of time and just the like I said, like you can only party for so long, and that's kind of what it was. Um, as much as we sort of tried to keep things under control, it's a bit of a beast that has just rolls on its own and becomes bigger than everybody. And so yeah, we made a collective decision to just stop. We didn't quit. We didn't do a farewell tour. We didn't really say anything except we're just gonna stop for now. And we left it open, but in our minds it was sort of over. Um, and then you asked about after that. Well, after that is when I started getting more into doing music for advertising. I was freelance composing for a couple of music houses, and then I went to work for one for a long time, and then I got into voice directing, voice acting, all that stuff.
And what was that day like? Like the day after you guys decided to, I guess, stop for now. Like, did you envision yourself in the position where you're at now, or were you kind of confused? Were you not sure? Like, what went through your head that next day after you
Well,
guys?
yeah, it's funny because you think you're okay with something in your head, and then the next day when it's reality, you're like, oh shit, like this is really not here anymore. Yeah, so it was a lot of things. It was mostly confusing, I think, just to sort of navigate this world. Um, in my mind, I thought, well, I'll just go and be a composer. I'll just go and write music for films, like big Hollywood films, no problem. I had no idea how hard that was to do, and how long that would take. Um, I quickly realized that I didn't love playing music unless it was with the guys in my band and playing our music. Um, I did wind up playing with a couple of people on a semi-regular basis, which was a lot of fun. Um, but I got more into the composing thing as kind of like will be, if I'm gonna have a second career, then it'll be this. And then I sort of just fell into voice directing after that. That wasn't planning on that
And
one.
yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, well, I don't know if you want to jump ahead to this or not, but then getting back together uh, came about because a really good friend of ours, whose name was Randy Kwan, he was one of these guys who kind of would bring people together. We would go to his house. He would let you stay at his house if you didn't have a place to stay. He'd feed you or lend you money or whatever you needed, because he just liked artists, and he liked musicians in particular. And he was actually in our band before our band was our band. He was in an early incarnation of it. Anyway, he was really sick. He was terminally ill, and we promised him that we would do a benefit concert. We would get back together and do a benefit concert for him, because he told us that we were stupid for not being together and not being a band. And what's wrong with you guys? And from his perspective, it makes sense. So anyway, so we had a very tentative first meeting, which went really well, and then we rehearsed and we booked this show at a place in Toronto called the Docks. It's called Rebel Nightclub now, and it holds about 2,500 people, and we sold it out right away. So that
Wow.
was a surprise. We had a great show, and everybody was really happy we were back together. And so we thought, oh, maybe we should do some more shows. We wrote and produced a song which we gave away for free. This is now 2012. This is 2011 actually, and so it's pretty early days. of the internet. And we basically crowdfunded a record, and then the rest, blah blah blah, just goes on from there.
What was it like in that period where you weren't together as a band? Did you guys keep in touch? Or was it just kind of like, okay, everybody needs kind of a bit of a breather, and then we'll just see what happens?
No, I would say like we kept in touch peripherally. Hugh and Trent and Trent Carr, a guitar player, and Steve Carr, who's our keyboard player and tour manager. We all kept in touch kind of sporadically over that time period. But there was no mention of actually playing again or doing anything. We were all kind of like, okay, we're all gonna disband and go our separate ways and do our own things. But what's interesting is that like none of us had a problem with each other. We didn't break up because of like interpersonal difficulties or anything like that. We just broke up because we just had to leave the party for a minute. We just had to go home and get some sleep. It was one of those kind of situations. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it wasn't difficult to regroup.
And speaking of parties, are there any? Where's the funnest place you've toured, and why?
Personally, I always liked Western Canada. The audiences are great. Rock and roll is very strong there. And also Mexico Mexico was great. Mexico City in particular was just a blast. It's just amazing. Like there's 35, when we were there were 30 million people living in Mexico City. So you have almost the population of Canada living in one city. So you can just imagine like the energy there.
Yeah.
So I always really liked that. That was always fun.
And what's the biggest stadium that you guys have played at? I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, we did. There was a festival called Edgefest, which was kind of like a precursor to Lollapalooza.
Okay.
That was about 30,000, I think.
Whoa, that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a different show at 30,000, than it is for like 1,500 or 2,000, which was our norm. Yeah, it's big. You can't tell if people are like watching or not.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, what's the energy difference like? Like, what does it feel like to perform, and in those two different aspects, and then also like, do you perform differently, or is it just that like it's just the amount of people that changes?
You do perform a little differently, I guess. Maybe your movements are more exaggerated in a bigger stage, like to make them bigger. But there's always screens as well, so that you're being projected at like the height of like 40 or 50 feet or something. So there's that, but it's just not as immediate. Like if I play a place that's say 1,500 people, I know that I can jump off stage and I can touch the person in the front row. At a festival, you can't do that as easily. Like you got to get off stage, you got to walk like a long way to the barrier, but it can still be done. And we always try and do that. Like we always try and connect to the audience. We're not really a band that just kind of isolates themselves on stage as this separate thing. And then crowds are bigger, so they're louder, but the feedback is like it's kind of hard to explain because it's like you're zooming out, right? So you see the crowd, but you really have to, like, I don't know how far away the first person is. Maybe they're like 30 feet away in a crowd that size. And then you really have to like focus to see people's faces and their expressions and stuff like that. And there's so many of them, you can't really do that. Whereas in like a club show, you can do that much more easily. Like you see people pretty clearly. Those are just some of the differences. But I mean, I like them both. Like they're both a lot of fun.
Man, I can't even imagine like what when you step out there and there's just there's a 30,000 person crowd. Like,
yeah,
what does that? Can you just maybe describe a little bit about what that feels like? Because you just mentioned, there's so many people all around. It's hard to distinguish all the faces. It's like, and it's to think that there's 30,000 people here who came to see me play the show. Like, that must be an almost indescribable feeling.
It's fun. Yeah, it's really fun. It's it's thrilling. It's the thrilling part of it for me, and I think for us, is that it's live and you can't retake it. You can't do another. You don't get another shot at it. So whatever you do in that next hour or hour and a half is you gotta live with it. And that's really exciting. Like, it's live performance is exciting for that reason. And seeing bands live is exciting for that reason as well, because you're only you and them are experiencing this thing right now, and nobody else in the world is ever gonna experience it. And that's kind of special, So yeah, I love it, and it overrides any sort of nerves that I might feel. It's just really exciting.
Have you ever given the mic to anybody in the crowd to sing?
Yeah, well, Hugh does that. Hugh goes out in the crowd quite a bit, like for a lead singer. He really gets out there with the people, and sometimes he'll get somebody to sing like a line in a song or something like that if he thinks it's a good idea. So yeah, sometimes, but we take our show really seriously. We don't want anybody to fuck it up. So there's a firm grip on the microphone, put it that way.
No, it's fascinating because I feel like depending on the artist, it's like you sometimes see that a lot. Sometimes the artist will talk to the crowd a lot and maybe like tell a story before they sing. Is that something you guys do, or do you just kind of go from like one song to the next and kind of without?
It depends on the kind of show it is, but no, Hugh's really, I mean, he is truly one of the great frontmen of all time, in my opinion. He engages the crowd. He's great to watch. Like, whenever we play shows, if Hugh gets off the stage, he'll go right to the back of the crowd. He'll go up to the balcony sometimes. And, Trent and Jesse and I and Steve will be up there rocking away just as hard as we were, but nobody's watching us anymore. They've all turned around and they're like looking for Hugh. Where is he? And that's like, somebody who has that kind of charisma and is that captivating, they can do whatever they want. So I don't know if that answers your question, but let me answer your question. Yeah, sometimes tells stories, sometimes sets up the song, sometimes we go bang, 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 and then take a break, and then, he talks to the audience. It really depends on the kind of show that it is. We did it was the 25th anniversary of our first album, Picture of Health, a few years ago. And we did a tour where we performed that in its entirety. And that was probably the most storytelling that was happening, because it was like sort of background on, the songs and, where we were when we wrote them and what they meant and stories around that time. But, it depends on the kind of show it is.
Yeah.
I was just curious just to, I guess I know we still have a lot to cover with the voice directing side of things and the composing and all that stuff. So maybe just to wrap up, your band part of your story.
Yeah.
What now that you guys have played as many shows as you had, partied like crazy, taken a break, brought the band back together and everything, like, how do you look back at your time as with the Headstones, and like what else is to come for you guys?
That's a great question, because it requires me to think backwards and forwards.
We're always asking the tough ones.
No, I'm so proud of what we've done. We have, I, actually, I would have to count. We have 10 or 11 records now. Um, we've played so many shows. I've seen so many people made happy and excited that love our band, and I'm super grateful that that I was able to be a part of that. Um, so that's how I look back on it. And as far as what's for the future, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like we're all in completely new places now. Like we just finished a tour in the fall, which was super successful. We have some shows in the summer, and we get together to do some writing for new material. I don't think there's any real push. I mean, we just put out our record last year, which is still going on the charts. It's still the second single still on the charts now. So there's no urgency that way. I think we just keep doing stuff. Like I know that everybody in the band wants to keep doing stuff, and that we all love it. And as long as we still love it, we'll keep doing it.
I have a pretty stupid question, or might be stupid.
Ah,
Do you
finally.
like whenever you go out and like do the shows, do you get time off
Yeah.
work? Like, is it sick time? Is it time off work? Like, how does that work?
It depends. Sometimes it has to be depending on where it is and the nature of it. But sometimes I can work during the day and then play the show at night because I mean, back to the partying conversation. Part of the reason that happens is because you have like 23 hours of downtime. When you're not playing your show, you're not doing anything. You're doing whatever you want, more or less. So it gives me a lot of time to do other things now, whereas I used to do other things then, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Well, that's a good segue, Ilya.
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. So when you first got into composing, I know, like a little bit ago, I asked you the question about like how people kind of go about it in school, but I'd be curious, to transition from being a bass player into, composing your own music. Like, what kind of transition is that like? And yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was always interested in computers, and I had a bit of a piano background, as I said. Uh, so when I got a computer, the first thing I did was look for like free music software that I could use. I started with this program called SoundForge, which is just stereo audio. So I would have to like record parts, cut them, and then like create like say a bass line out of that, and then find some drum samples and make those separately, and then place those on top and mix them together. It was almost like early multi-tracking when you only had two tracks to work with.
Hmm.
Um, so it was kind of a natural evolution, and then from there I got into more complicated programs, and now I use Logic Pro Audio. Um, and then from the compositional angle, it was just kind of I got a shot from a friend of mine who owns a motion graphics company, and he said, "Do you want to put music to this? Like, I don't have anything, and I want to show it to my client, but I don't have any music for it." And so I wrote some stuff, and I sampled a Police record, which I shouldn't have done, but I did. And you'd never know it was a sample of a Police record. Anyway, so I did that, and he liked it, and then they made a spot out of it, and then I had a spot to go and show to some of the music houses that were hiring me to be a bass player on sessions when you see musicians like playing on sessions a lot for commercial music houses. And the creative director there said, "Oh, this is pretty good. I'll throw you in the mix for the next time we have another spot." And so then I started writing spots for him, and then I landed a few, and then started writing more, and then started writing for more people, and it just kind of segued from there.
Yeah, so when it comes to because again, I think there's a lot of facets of things that you do even now. I know
Yeah.
one of them is voice directing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about how you get into voice directing? Because I know the story is a producer kind of made you do it. You had a choice between either doing it or nobody's getting their voice director that day. So I'd love to hear about that process, how that happened.
It just kind of happened where I was in the room and the guy who was supposed to be voice directing the session was late. And and the talent was there and it was union talent and the clock's ticking. And I had sat in on enough sessions to know like the basics of how to get going. And, I wound up doing most of the session with a lot of help from the engineer and the copywriter who was a good friend. And then it gave me the confidence to keep doing it. I was also a voice actor as well. So I was being directed by the other directors in the city, some of whom are really great still to this day. So I learned a lot from them. And, like learning anything, you kind of watch and listen and, steal a couple of tricks here and there and make up a couple of your own and see what flies. And, yeah, so it just kind of happened. And then before I knew it, I was doing that full time.
So what is can you describe what a session is like when you're directing somebody's voice? Because I feel like it's something so unfamiliar to so many people, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you get a lot of people asking you, I have no idea what that means, and then you explain it and they're still a little bit confused. So if you can explain a little bit on what the process is like to have your voice directed.
Well, when people ask me that question, I start off by saying, okay, so how a director directs actors. So I'm a director that directs voice actors. And so they can usually get their head around that. And then, but where they lose it is they don't realize how many facets there are just to somebody saying a simple sentence and how many ways there are to say something and how fast or slow or how much emphasis you can give to a certain word or how you can draw things out or compress things. They don't understand the concept of say, which is when you say something that you're seeing on screen. All these things come into play. So a typical session will go something like this. We will have gotten a rough cut of the commercial. Let's say it's a 30-second spot. We will have gotten script. We will have done the casting, which means we have a bunch of voice actors auditioning for the spot with the script or some version of the script that's close enough. During the casting process, I'll listen through. I'll make a few recommendations to the agency, but we'll supply them with the full casting. They'll make their choice. We'll get that person. We'll hire that person, make sure they're available. So they come in. So now it's 10 a.m. on Monday. The talent comes in, usually with a few people from the agency, usually the copywriter, hopefully, maybe an art director, probably a producer, and probably an account person. There may or may not be a client in there with them, but suffice it to say, that's the crew we've got. And then it's myself, an audio engineer who's recording the voice actor, and the voice actor themselves, who's in the booth that I'm sitting in now. They're in a separate room, which is soundproofed, but they can hear us when I press this little button called Talk Back, and that just opens up a microphone to the room that I'm in, and they can hear everything in our room, and we can hear everything in their room. So now they've got this script. So usually I just have them blow through the script a couple of times, just read it through naturally. If I haven't worked with them before, it gives me a sense of how they read when they're in the booth, how much experience they have, if they're new, if, do they have good mic technique? And I'm watching, engaging all these things as we go. Then I have a brief conversation with the copywriter about tone. How do we want this to sound? What did you like about their audition? What didn't you like about their audition? I kind of get to know, what they're after. And then after that, it's just having them read it a whole bunch of times. Sometimes they'll read the whole script through. Sometimes it's great right out of the gate, except for a few lines. So I'll have them read those lines again. And the wonder of digital technology is that we can have a gazillion takes if we want, and we'll mark what we like best about each of those takes. Maybe it's a 4-line script and we like line 1 from everything. but we don't like anything. We don't like any of the line fours. So have them read the line four a bunch of times differently. We can edit those and place those in. Then we have to make sure that we're to time. We have to make sure that it falls within 30 seconds. If it's too short, let's say it's 25 seconds, or let's say it's 35 seconds, that's not going to work, right? We also have to make sure that it lines up to what's happening on screen. You know, he can't say, if it's a car spot and the big reveal is the new whatever, we can't have him say the name of the car when the car is not on the screen. We can't have him say that, like, you know, way too early or way too late. So timing is important too. Once we get a take that we like, and this could take any amount of time, but it should take about an hour back and forth. Then we'll post a link for our client. If our client's not in the room and not physically there, we'll post a link. The client will review it, and they'll come back to us with their feedback, which hopefully is, yes, we love it, we're all done. But more often than not, they have some criticisms or some suggestions or some things that they'd like to hear, some questions. So we do that, and we go back and we address those things, and then we repost it, and hopefully the client's happy at that point. Now, the other thing I should mention is that casting is so important. You have to get the right person for the job. If you don't cast, and you guys know this, if you don't cast properly, then it's not gonna go well, because that person is not gonna be able to give you what you really want. So that's the most important part of the whole process.
So going back to you mentioned they have to have good mic technique. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I don't want to pull a mic off of there. So here we have a microphone. Can you see this okay?
It's blurry.
It's blurry.
I think because the background that you have on Zoom.
Oh, there you go. There you go. If your face is in front of it, it's fine.
Okay, so this is, you can see this?
If you just lean a little further over, I think. Oh, there we go.
Let's take the blur off. I didn't know that was on. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Let's do the whole podcast again.
Yeah, let's might as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're speaking into a mic, and this isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination because of the angle, but if I'm talking to you, I should be facing the mic while I'm talking to you. And I can move around a little bit, that's fine. But what I don't want to be doing is talking over here, and all of a sudden I'm off mic, right? The other thing I don't want to be doing is, if I have words with a lot of P's in it, like popcorn, if I really hit that hard, it's going to, what we call, blow up the mic, and you're going to hear this kind of sound, which we'll have to get rid of in post, and it's a real pain to do that. You don't want to have to do that. So they should know that things with P's or B's, or those kind of, like what we call plosives, that they either turn their head a little bit when they say popcorn, or that they back off a little bit when they say popcorn, things like that, right? Sometimes you'll get somebody who has a great voice, but they don't know how to use it. And so that's not a problem. It just means you have to coach them a little bit on their technique and keep them consistent. That's what I meant by that.
Interesting. How like, what's the process like of being a voiceover actor? Is it just people are randomly like, I think I have a good voice. I want to try this out and kind of see what happens?
Yep, exactly. Pretty much.
Interesting.
That's pretty much it.
Fascinating.
And then if you're good, I mean, you should probably go and take a class or two to see if you even like it, and then make a voice demo reel, which is you reading actual commercial scripts, probably with some music underneath that. There's services that will do this for you, and then you send that around and you try and get an agent, because that's the best way to get auditions. And but that's basically it. You think, or somebody thinks and tells you that you have a good voice and that you should do voiceover.
I mean, you do some voice acting yourself. How did you get started in that?
I think it was the same thing. I think
Okay.
somebody said you should do voice acting. And I was like, what's that? And it was a friend who introduced me uh, to this lady, and she was working at a post audio place. And I went and had a meeting with her, and she introduced me to a guy who was an agent, and he took me on his roster. And then I auditioned for like 18 months and didn't get anything. And then I got something, and then I got a few more things, and then it just kind of went from there.
So
Like,
is this before or after you became a voice director?
well, this is well before.
Well before. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting. And
yeah.
actually, just a note as well. Ben and I listened to what you had on your website when it comes to voice acting, and it's incredible. I feel like
Thank
once in
you.
a while it's like we'll hear somebody do a voiceover, and we're just like, oh my god, this person can do so many different things. Because the thing is, like, I do find that like a lot of people, and I don't know, maybe it's because they're beginners, but it's like they kind of have one voice and that's what they're good at, but they don't really do anything else. So it's like if you're the emotional guy, it's like that's all you can do. It's like if you're the funny guy, it's like that's all you can do. So it's very very cool to see like how many facets there are just to like a voiceover from one
Oh,
person.
yeah. I mean, and there's so many wildly elastic voiced people out there. It's pretty incredible what I've seen people do when I'm directing them. There's a lot of talent for sure.
It, do you find because you've done the voice acting that it makes directing easier?
Yes, I think it. I don't know if it makes it easier, but I establish a rapport with the actors, and I only know this because they've told me this. But I establish a rapport with them really quickly, and they like that. So I think it relaxes them. But that's only based on what they've said. Like I didn't set out to do that or anything like that. But I can empathize with what they're going through because the hard part about voice acting is that you don't know what those seven people in the other room are saying. You know, you just hear them talking and maybe hear them laughing and you're like, oh my God, do they like me? Are they laughing at me? Like, do they like this? And they're probably talking about something completely irrelevant. You know, they're not even talking about you. But it can be a very disconcerting and isolating experience um, because you're not in the room with everybody. You know, so I try and make them feel comfortable, and you know things like do you need a break? It's been 90 minutes and you've been talking nonstop. Do you need a break? Do you need water? You know, is how's the temperature in there? You know, how are your headphones? All that kind of stuff. That all goes a long way because when people are performing, they have to feel comfortable and they have to feel like they're being looked after.
Have you have you ever had any like botched voiceovers that like let's say you chose them and everything seemed to go fine, but then you just were not able to get them to a place that you were happy with? And how do you go about that?
Uh, I only had to fire somebody once in the middle of a session, and it it wasn't it wasn't because they were bad. It was because just through like just an administrative error, the wrong actor had been brought in. Um, they had chosen one person, and then the person that brought in wasn't that person, and none of us realized this until we were well into the session. So we're just like, that's great. I think we've got everything we need. Thanks a lot. And so we let them go and paid them, and then we just had to reschedule the session with the correct actor.
Okay, I was about to ask, but that must have been the most uncomfortable conversation. But it's
Yeah,
thankfully you're able to move past it pretty easily.
yeah.
Um, so you do you're doing the directing, you're doing the voice acting, you're doing composing. Like, how do you split your time normally these days? Like, what takes up the bulk of your time? What are you enjoying working on? Like,
And you still have your band.
yeah, and
Yeah,
you still got your band too. I
right,
mean,
right.
it's you got a lot
Yeah,
going on.
yeah. I mean, the bulk of my time is at Circumflex. So that's split between voice directing, casting. I don't do any composing for Circumflex. I leave that to our awesome in-house composers who are amazing. Um, and between that, I have a son that plays basketball at a pretty high level. So that takes up quite a bit of our time. Um, yeah, I mean, uh, there's always stuff that I'm interested in. That's the problem. I don't have. I mean, I told you I just got back from vacation, but that's the first real downtime I've had for a while.
What's what stuff are you interested in other than anything to do with music or voices?
Oh,
Do you have any like fun hobbies on the side other than the million things you do?
yeah, road cycling.
Road cycling.
Yeah,
No way.
yeah, I ride a lot.
How'd you get into that? Because I always find that for some reason people that get into like running or road cycling, they always have like a weird story on how they got into it.
Oh
Because
yeah,
nobody is like, oh, I just want a bike. It's like,
I've kind of a weird story. I mean, I always had a bike, around, and then a friend of mine who's also a bass player um, got into it, and he got really into it. I'm like, what is this? He goes, oh man, like it's awesome. Like, check it out. So I got on his bike and put his shoes on. We have the same size feet, and got into it. I'm like, oh man, you can really go fast. Like this is a lot of fun. And he had a friend who worked at a bike store, and I went to see him, and I bought like an entry level sort of aluminum road bike, and then started riding with a bike club, and learned how to ride in a group and all that stuff. And then like I think a lot of endurance sports, it's just like, okay, how far can I go today? How far can I push myself? What can I get? What can I do? Can I beat this record? And can I race? Can I go in this race? Can I do that? And so it just kind of came out of that.
so they do any races or any goals you have with that?
No, I don't do that. I just do now. I just do like grand fondos, that kind of thing. And
Interesting.
that's only if there's time to train for them, because there's nothing worse than riding slow when you've ridden fast.
And do you usually like ride in the city or
Yeah,
is
I
there
ride.
like places you go to?
Well, I ride to work. I have a single speed that I ride to work. But that's really close. Like I only live like 6 or 7 kilometers away. And then either early in the morning or on the weekends, in Toronto, to get out of the city and ride, you have to ride for about 45 minutes in one direction to kind of do that. It's difficult to get to get out of the city. But I do ride with a club, so we'll go off, we'll head out at like 7 a.m. and then wind up in some small town by like by 9, have coffee and croissants, and then come back home.
That sounds really nice, honestly.
Sounds relaxing after
Yeah.
everything else.
It is.
It's like you do a tour one day and then you relax on the bike another day.
Yeah, yeah, and it keeps me in shape for touring as well.
That's true. That's I mean, that's a great side benefit. I was curious. I know it said on your LinkedIn that you've been able to do some voice directing with some celebrity talent.
Yeah.
I was wondering what that's like. Are they just like, are they kind of just god level and they just come in and they're like, I'm gonna nail this first try, or is it still the same kind of little back and forth?
Yeah, you're still. I mean, you're still working with an actor, but now I'm working with an accomplished film or television actor, and that's different. But my experiences have been great. Like they in every case that I can remember, they've been like happy to be there. What do you need? What can I do? Probably the only complication is that usually their time is limited. So you're like,
Hmm.
okay, we've got from 11 till 12:30, and then that's it. Like that's all we're getting. So you just have to be mindful of that and structure that.
And one other question I had was, I saw that you have also composed for a variety of different formats, like you've done documentary, done series.
Yeah.
Um, is there a difference in how you creatively attack those?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Like You know, the long form stuff is you can sink your teeth into it more because you just have more time, you know. Um, it's really like project by project though. Like I couldn't make like a sweeping generalization about that.
Right.
Except that, you know, documentaries are maybe not quite as scored as like, you know, films or short films are, but that's the only real difference. And then it's just about like what kind of instruments are you using, what kind of genre are you composing in. Um, but yeah, that's the only difference really to me.
Do you have a favorite genre that you like to compose in?
Uh, nope, because it's all dictated by whatever the show is. Like I've been lucky enough to write on a few shows over the past 2 years, and they all have their own specific kind of texture and palette and instrumentation. So I just go with that. I mean, the most exciting part is when you're first talking about it when it's brand new.
Yeah.
And it's like we want it to be like this, and we want it to be like that, and you know, and then you do that, and like, yeah, it doesn't really work. Let's do something else. That's the fun part.
Classic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then you know, and then once you arrive on that, because it's episodic and because it's a series, you stay in that realm.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
but I didn't answer your question. To answer your question, I like writing ambient type stuff.
that's cool. That's like one of our. That's what we lean into mostly when we're
Oh, is that
working on
right?
like passion projects and stuff like that. We always
Yeah,
like something that's a little bit more atmospheric,
yeah.
right? Then that builds. Well,
Uh,
yeah,
as you
atmosphere.
can see, we have no idea how to talk about music other
Yeah.
than the very
Sorry.
basic vocabulary we have.
It's really okay. I mean, I have no idea how to talk about what you guys do either. So, you know, like I don't know. I still don't know what a focus puller does. Like, is that really somebody that just like changes the focus on a camera? Is that
Yeah.
what they do?
Well,
Yeah, and it's incredibly impressive for
Yeah,
us.
that's what I'm saying.
It's-
Like, I have no idea.
yeah, it's
So yeah,
funny.
don't
We
worry
because
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
was gonna
funny
say.
because we just yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like we had on our latest commercial we had one of the best focus pullers in Nova Scotia, and literally for definitely there was a few points where Ben and I would just be like, "Whoa, look at that! Like, look at how quick he does it." And it's literally all it is just moving your hand back and forth, just
Right.
pulling focus correctly. But there's such an art to it because it's so difficult to do if you've ever tried it yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like imagine if if you're shooting, I don't know if you know much about cameras, but if you're shooting on something that's like a T 1.5, which is just like the depth of
Aperture.
field is super shallow.
Okay.
What happens is like even the tiniest adjustment can change it from being like perfectly sharp to a blurry mess.
Okay.
So we shot the whole thing at T 1.5, and we're just watching him just walk that line was just so impressive. And I know we're nerding out
It's
pretty hard right
it's
now, but
pretty,
it was
Yeah,
just
but
pretty much
very
a,
cool to watch.
it's pretty much a surgeon who doesn't get paid enough.
he probably loves that definition.
Yeah.
But don't you think like that's my overall philosophy about life is like whatever you do, be a pro at it. Like if you can be a pro, you know, whatever it is, it's awesome. Like it's awesome to see people that are pros at what they do. Like I can't think of a good example right now, but it could be the most basic thing in the world. You know, like you know,
ASMR.
ASMR, yeah, for sure. You know,
Do you?
yeah,
I'd actually be very curious in terms of kind of talking about that because right now, both in the film industry and I feel like in a lot of other places, like a lot of because things are so much more accessible now. It's like every person has a camera, every person can make music,
yeah.
every person can do a lot of different things, and I feel like now the person who composes can also do sound design and all that stuff. How are you seeing that combined with how things are or how things have been until that point where it's like every person is specialized in exactly what they do?
I see that one thing I noticed is that there's no like I think it used to be that there was a trajectory that everybody would go through like you would sit around and you would sort of learn at the feet of somebody who was already a professional at it, and then you would assist them, and then you would learn that way. Um, Now, because you can just kind of get all the tools you need, you don't need to do that. You can just learn on your own, or there's tons of YouTube videos you can watch. It's master class. Like there's all these ways of getting into what you're doing, um, which creates two things. It creates a lot of creativity, which is great. It also creates people that skip what to me are very important steps technically in what they're doing. Um, and that's just something I've noticed. It's probably just part of the way that things are going. Um, but those are the two big things that I've noticed. So I mean, I try and be positive about it and think, oh yeah, I mean, these levels are all over the place, but the idea is really good. Get that sometimes. I mean, we don't at Circumflex, we don't have that issue with we don't have that issue with anything audio related, because as I said, our composers are great. They're all in house. Our sound designers are the same, graded in house, and so we're not getting anything from other sources that's weird or wrong to us. Um, but that's only because there's systems in place to ensure that everything is top notch.
Right, right. That makes sense. Um, I guess to kind of wrap things up, I'd be curious to know where you see yourself going next in your career or in life. Like what do you have on the horizon? That's part one. And part two is if you had any advice to give for someone who's thinking about doing something in the creative world, or maybe if it could be specifically to the audio industry, what words of wisdom could you provide?
That was a very well crafted question.
Thank you.
So part one, without anything specific coming to mind, I mean, just more of the same. Like I'm really lucky. I love what I do, and I love sort of all the things that I do. Um, so just more, bigger, better projects, work, people, collaborations. Um,
What is bigger and better for you?
yeah, let's see. There's a follow up. Um, this immersive project that we just did was awesome. I mean, the scale of this thing is, and I'm not even really aware of how big it is, because it went on for a long time before I joined it. But those kinds of things, sort of like singular, experiential things like that, are very interesting to me. Um, and then bigger and better, just like scale. Like if it's a commercial, then yes, bigger, more fun, more crazy, more wild, whatever. Just stretching those boundaries. Uh, Advice to people that want to get into a creative industry, I think my only advice would just be like, just make stuff, like try stuff out. You know, you could be any age, and I'm sure that whatever you want to do, there's the tools available for you to do it at little or no cost. There's all kinds of resources in which to learn things, and just make the stuff, and know that the first few things that you make are probably going to suck, but when you get past that, then they'll start getting better and better and better and better and better as you go on. Um, and don't let anybody tell you can't do anything, because you can do anything you want. You can do whatever you want. Probably now more than ever, I think. So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't worry if people laugh at you. Don't worry if you think that it sucks, because it will at first, but then just keep doing it. And I guarantee you that very quickly you will start discovering more and cooler stuff about your own work, and it'll get better.
Thank you for listening to our conversation with Tim White. To support the podcast, please consider subscribing below and liking the video. And finally, I'll leave you with this quote from David Bowie. I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring. Thank you again for listening. We hope to see you next time.